It is 5:30, and therefore it must be the meeting time. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good evening.
Confirm. Thank you. Awesome. Great. It is the 23rd of February. It is 5:30 p.m. Welcome to the February 22 regular Complete Streets Commission meeting. And I think if you're dialed in, that means you already have the right meeting number. And just for completion's sake, well, I'm sorry, somehow I lost my screen. Okay, let me try again here. Please bear with me. I've been having problems with my screen. I'm gonna switch. Okay, we have a problem. Okay, Ken, sorry, I lost my screen here. Let's try it again one more time. Okay, it is 5:31 now, so we start again the meeting. And we have a phone number if you want to dial in. It is 623-404-9000 if you don't have access to a computer. So first thing is we have the quorum, and as usual, we'll take 20 seconds to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in private. So I'll give everyone just a brief moment to do so. Okay. So with that, we go to any comments or public comments for items not on the agenda. This is your chance to speak on items not on the agenda. If you wish to speak, please identify yourself or just wave your hand virtually or turn on your camera and then announce yourself. Okay, going once, going twice. I don't see anyone who wishes to speak on items not on the agenda. So with that, we go straight to the agenda, and our number one item is approving the minutes from the December 1st, 2021 meeting. Okay. I look at my fellow commissioners. Any comments or any feedback on those minutes? I'll take the silence as a no. Very well. So if so, do I see anyone putting a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, great.
I second.
All right, very well. So let's start with Suresh. Vote, yay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Tom? Okay, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes, so we have 4-0. And therefore the motion passes and the minutes for December 1st, 2021 are approved. We move now to the second item on the list, and that is this January 26th of 2022. That's last month's minutes. Same process. Any input, any feedback, any comments?
You're talking about the agenda from last month? Or this, the agenda for this month?
This is the agenda for this month.
Yeah. So number 5 at the bottom of the first page, under the title there, the status update.
We're not on the agenda, Tom. We're talking about number 2 on the agenda, which is approving the minutes from last month.
Oh, okay.
We're still on item number 2 on the agenda.
Okay.
So if there are any comments on the minutes from last month, which is January 26th, please state your feedback and input. Otherwise, I will take your silence as no input. Very well. Okay, any motion to approve the minutes from January 26th?
Yeah, I'll move to approve it.
Okay, very well. A second?
I'll second it.
Very well. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Okay, I see 4 yays and 0 nays, so that's 4-0 approved. All right, so with that, we move to item number 3 on the agenda, which is a discussion or presentation, I should say, by Nancy Seaman to the commission in regard to the school drop-off safety concern at the Los Altos High School. So Nancy, the floor is yours. Nancy, can you announce yourself, please? Nancy, we cannot hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. All right.
I am Nancy Seaman, and I have lived at 201 Valencia Drive for the last 34 years. I live, I want to go back just a second.
You might be able to use the arrow key, maybe?
Sorry,
No worries. Take a moment. Get yourself situated, Nancy. No
go
need-
to slide. Okay, here we go. Is the audio okay?
Yes, everything is good. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So the area that I want to talk about tonight is in the blue box. It's the last, or the first 5 houses next to Almond Avenue. And you'll notice that it's a bottleneck for the streets on the west side of the Los Altos High School. It's the only street between San Antonio and the high school. It's adjacent to the new cycle track, and there are no stopping zones along Almond Avenue now. The high school has also, in their main parking lot, prohibited pickups and drop-offs on campus from 7:30 to 4. And this year they have closed the drop-off zone in front of their library that has been open for a long time for drop-offs. So we're affected by those drop-offs and pickups as the students go to school. So the number of students at the high school has increased dramatically over the last several years, and walking, biking, carpooling, and taking the bus are being promoted. And that's, I think, what brought about the cycle track in front of, on our side of Almond School. I'm sorry, on our side of Almond Avenue near the high school. The city and the school changes to the traditional drop-off zones have shifted the traffic onto Valencia Drive, where it has caused significant problems at the bottleneck in the first block. So cars typically drop off students, then do a U-turn across Valencia Drive. The students then must walk back through the newly arriving traffic. The afternoon traffic is essentially 4 lanes of chaotically moving cars. And here you see students waiting to be picked up in a no stopping zone. So we definitely need more enforcement. The extra traffic causes issues with the cycle track for drop-offs. In a 20-minute period in the morning, I counted 62 cars entering Valencia, dropping off students, and then doing a U-turn before exiting. So that represents 124 crossings of a cycle track at a time when the bike traffic toward the school is in the unexpected direction on the cycle track. The extra cars at pickup times also interfere with the pedestrians and bicycles. So our block of Valencia is fairly unique because Valencia is the only street intersecting the cycle track. This block is also adjacent to no stopping zones on Almond. And again, it's a bottleneck for cars, bikes, and pedestrians. Residents leaving their driveways have too many moving obstacles to dodge, and the visibility is poor. Valencia is supposed to be a safe street for kids to walk along to Almond School or the high school, and there are no sidewalks. So what I first was working on in the fall, and starting in the beginning of January, I added extra bollards there to make a pedestrian zone. This is just on the east side of Valencia to give the students some area to walk. And we have worked with the engineering staff to add this update to the sign and stripe plan. And I believe that has a summer of '22 target date. What I would like to do now is to represent the residents of my block, the first block of Valencia Drive, to request an immediate creation of a no student drop-off or pickup zone. The existing poles mean that some signs could be added quickly, and the zone can easily be expanded or changed by just changing the signs as we need them for future issues. Other neighbors have been asked to reserve this flexibility. In general, though, the residents on our street prefer a minimum of signage and very few changes along most of Valencia Drive. So the zone I am proposing is shown in yellow. It's the first 5 houses along Valencia Drive near Almond Avenue. So how do we progress if we start with this? So I've talked to many people who agree that this area needs far more protection than it has now. The most dangerous areas near the high school need protection all day. Bordering the most dangerous areas, perhaps restriction could be more limited in duration, maybe just no drop-offs in the morning, for instance. So we should also consider drop-off zones along Jardin, next to the access routes to campus, where there's a sidewalk so that students could be dropped off, just walk across the sidewalk or along the sidewalk to the access points. We also want to work with the high school to minimize the duration of their drop-off zone closures. So on behalf of my neighbors, I'm requesting authorization to work with the traffic department to make this safety zone on Valencia a reality. And I think I'd like to just leave this slide up, so if there are questions, I can point them out on the slide. And that's my last slide.
Thank you, Nancy.
Oops, I didn't mean to do that.
No worries. Any questions from the commission to Nancy? Any questions or clarification, please? Suresh, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for the update and the presentation. I'd just like one clarification. You were alluding to the U-turns, and you said you counted 62 of them. Could you describe what the pattern of the U-turns is? I was not clear on to what you were alluding to there.
Yes, so the cars will enter, maybe I'll make it a bigger, oops. The cars will enter Valencia, drop out, go to the right, I want to just kind of draw here. There we go. So cars will enter Valencia from Almond, making a left turn, come over here and park as soon as they can, or stop as soon as they can to drop off a student. The second car will come leapfrog over them. Then the first car will come out and do a U-turn right here in the middle of the street, again cross the cycle track, and go back out towards San Antonio. So our issue is mostly with cars coming from San Antonio, dropping off, looping around in the middle of the street. It's a fairly wide street, which unfortunately does allow for 4 lanes of moving cars. So that's the typical U-turn mode.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Other questions from the commission? Tom, Steve?
Yeah, I have a question or two.
Go ahead, Tom.
So you said earlier the city and school changed the traditional drop-off zones. What was the reasoning behind all that? I mean, it sounds like we tried to fix one problem and create another.
Okay, so this area along Almond Avenue used to permit cars to stop or to be parked during the day, and that was removed to put in the cycle track.
Okay, so it's a cycle
Okay.
track.
And then the high school's rationale for closing the drop-off zone is that cars have to cross the cycle track, and that would be interfering with the cycle track. The trouble is that now all the cars come this way and cross the cycle track.
So the drop-off zone is over there by Alice Way, or it's parallel to that, between that and the high school?
So the drop-off zones at the high school,
Right.
Are-
I mean,
this is the
that's-
main parking lot, and then the U-shaped curve goes this way. So those are the
Okay.
zones that were changed at the high school. Yeah, and then this whole area was changed for the cycle track.
Okay, so thank you. The other question I have is, what about, just put it out there, what about, I'm not sure what the city or state rules are for making a U-turn on that road, because I'm not sure if they can legally do a U-turn there or not. So if they could, maybe putting up a no U-turn sign would alleviate some of the problems. Maybe, I don't know, Jaime or Melissa might know, or somebody else on the commission might know about if putting a no U-turn sign up there would help, or if the city can enforce that, or the police can enforce that. Just thinking out loud there.
Give Marissa a chance, or anyone from the city, to answer this question.
I can answer part of that. I had a call recently with the police department, and we talked about this issue, also the U-turns. And so we talked about the idea of placing a double yellow line along Valencia, at least for a portion of the road, and that would give them more ability to enforce the no U-turn policy. I don't know technically if they are illegal at this moment without the double yellow. I forget that piece.
Maybe even adding a sign too. But, okay, thank you.
Great. Steve?
Nancy, thank you so much for this presentation. It looks like you've really done a lot of homework, and this slide presentation is excellent, and I really appreciate your bringing it forward. I don't live far from there, and I'm there all the time, and I think that with the growing population of the high school, which I anticipate will continue to grow, we're going to continue to have to think about what we do with the traffic in order to minimize accidents and maximize safety, and also do it in a way that is workable for the neighborhood. And so my question really is a little broader, and I'd like to address this both to you and either to Marissa or Jaime, which is that when you look at the traffic patterns both when students are arriving at the high school and when they're leaving the high school. There's really the streets around the high school are Valencia on the San Antonio side that runs down to Jardine, and then Alicia that runs on the other side of the high school, which is closer to the El Monte side. So motorists who are dropping off kids who are coming the other way instead of coming in from San Antonio Road or coming towards San Antonio Road, are they creating the same kind of a problem on Alicia and then making a U-turn there? So do we have really two problems here?
That's a question to Marissa, Steve, right?
Anybody who thinks that they have some information, I think.
Yes, the answer is yes. I have pictures. I've seen the same problem also on Alicia.
Yeah, and I agree. I've seen the same and heard the same from the police department and seen it myself on site visits.
So I don't know if this is a time for comments or
No,
not.
let's keep it to questions for now. I think we'll keep the comments and feedback for.
Okay.
Later.
And then my other question then is, has the high school or the high school district been sufficiently involved to offer any potential recommendations or solutions from their perspective?
Steve, I think it's a great segue. I see that the Vice Principal Rosenberg is on the list. And then if you wish to speak, Mr. Rosenberg, this is your chance. I would love to give the high school the opportunity to educate the commission too.
Sure, thank you. First, I'm very sympathetic to Ms. Seaman's concerns. She put it very well at the conclusion of her presentation that addressing one problem often creates others. And we're aware of these concerns. We share them. We actually have been discussing, and this is actually with the city also, looking at Jardin as a better drop-off spot. So we very much look at the current status as needing revision because the cycle track was installed at the beginning of this school year. And we do tell parents what we think they ought to do. And we asked them or told them that they had to find places to drop their students off because of the new cycle track. And the only thing that I'll correct about what Ms. Seaman described is that the red zone that is no stopping extends all the way down to the far end of Los Altos High School, actually a little bit further than that. So in theory, it's been the case for a long time since I've been paying attention that persons are not supposed to stop and drop off on that side of Almond. And with the cycle track, the issue in part is driving across it to drop a student off. But the primary concern is that if we allow drop-offs, what happens is people line up and wait in the cycle track on Almond. So when we gave parents advice who were dropping off their students about where to go, we suggested some of the nearby streets, but obviously I think just didn't anticipate what Ms. Seaman is describing on Alicia. And so I don't have a solution now. Obviously, if I did, we would put it in place. I think working with the city on making changes to Jardin would at least alleviate some of the challenge. And I think some of the suggestions Ms. Seaman has for her immediate block makes sense. That's my summary of kind of what our thinking has been. I don't know if there's specific questions that I didn't get to in that where we are now kind of summary.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. Steve, any questions for Mr.
Yeah, while Mr. Rosenberg is speaking, I guess one of the thoughts I had, and it's really a question, is that at the primary and middle schools during arrival and departure times, there are human beings who are crossing guards and they actually help direct and control traffic at nearby intersections where bottlenecks can occur. And in that way are preventing some things like, I imagine, illegal U-turns. Has the school ever considered implementing that kind of a program using a human factor to help with the safety or traffic problems?
We've discussed it, and there is a crossing guard at Gordon and Almond. I think part of the challenge is providing sufficient staffing. I don't know if a high school is necessarily more complicated than an elementary or middle school in this regard, but there would be need for multiple persons if that were the solution, because there are other areas of concern. But yes, I think somehow communicating and directing people to follow what is legal and or just safe is the key part of it, whether it's staff that we would hire or other approaches, definitely on the list.
Thank you.
Any more questions to Mr. Rosenberg from the commission? Mr. Rosenberg, just I have a couple of questions for you. So if I understand right, the student population is roughly 2,500 students, give or take?
It's about 2,200 now. Actually, we've kind of been level for the last few years. We grew a lot in the previous 10 years. The last few years, it's been about level at 2,200 and some.
2,200, okay. Is there any census or any estimate of what fraction of those come to the school by vehicle versus pedestrian or bicycling?
We have seen a significant increase in bicycling, both from the Mountain View side and the Los Altos side, because students come from both cities in both directions. We haven't done a census recently, but it's around half of the students at this point are dropped off one way or the other. We don't have very many student drivers, some, and then bicycles, pedestrians, and parents dropping off or peers dropping off.
Okay, so half would be, say, maybe close to 1,000 vehicles coming to the school, approximately, give or take?
Yeah, I would say probably fewer because there's, carpooling and stuff, but around there, yeah.
Okay. And that's all within half an hour?
Yeah, or they definitely try and squeeze it close to the bell, but yeah, half an hour and a great intensity within the last 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, less than that. So we're talking about, call it, let's say 800 vehicles in maybe 20 minutes or so, right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Very well. Nancy, would you please turn off your screen sharing? Thank you. Great. I'm gonna actually now open it up to anyone in the public who, actually, you know what? I'm gonna bring it back to the city and take any more comments or color if you wish to add any. Marissa or anyone from the city who wants to add any more input, that'd be great. You don't have to, but if you wish, that's the opportunity.
I have, just kind of a couple of thoughts kind of already alluded to by some people, but yeah, kind of a few ideas for this area, obviously, and we've talked about this area a lot internally on the city side, and we've done quite a number of site visits, and we've been, monitoring the cycle track, and then obviously seeing what's going on as a result of going out there to see the new improvements. So a couple of ideas that I had were, which were already mentioned, a drop off along Hardin. So maybe even a rolling drop off, something that's pretty highly monitored. I see that work in a lot of other cities really well. And that's like a long straightaway curb where there aren't any driveways to cross and, no cross streets, and there are the back entrances straight into campus. So I think that's a good opportunity. I've talked to Galen about doing some communications with the parents. I think that would be a great time to really reiterate the no U-turn request, and also just giving more direction on how parents come in to do the drop-offs and where they do the drop-offs and things like that. So those are two kind of main ideas. Another thing that's in the works is which is kind of tangential, is a survey to students about their perceptions of the cycle track. And so that would include kind of areas that they think are, maybe still needing improvement. And so I think that might illuminate issues at the intersections of Valencia as well. So that could be an interesting way to gather more info, and we could potentially add some questions to that that could give us more information on some of these other things that we're talking about.
Okay, so if I understand right, Marissa, I see two things here, and I'm just trying to clarify it in my head. The first one is the system itself, as we, as in the city, we've designed it in conjunction with the school, of course, but ultimately that seems to be the responsibility of the city to determine the traffic patterns around the high school. And that's sort of where you can add the signage and double lines and what have you, right? And the second one, where perhaps it's a bit trickier, seems to be like there's some kind of a change in behavior that we need to instill in the parents or whoever is coming to school anyway. Can you maybe perhaps Mr. Rosenberg and you, Marissa, educate me as to what are the pressure points that we have in our possession here that we could use to instill that change in behavior? Or perhaps they're none. I don't know. I mean, if you just you
think
have tickets, enforcement, you pay them. You have to pay a fee. I don't know what the answers are, but I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, so kind of taking a step back from that question, if we kind of take one step back and kind of look at a slightly bigger perspective, I think some sort of transportation demand management for the students and the campus would be a good starting point. So, and this is something I've talked to our Safe Routes to School coordinator, Andrean, about as well, particularly with regards to Los Altos High. So how can we encourage students to take more alternative modes of transportation? So how can we encourage students to walk and bike and carpool more? If there is a lot of student population coming from Mountain View, is there an opportunity for a school bus or a shuttle or a carpool system? And that also kind of flags the schoolroutes.org app, which is being rolled out currently, which will soon have a feature for students to organize walking school buses, biking together, and also carpools. So that's a good avenue. So I think TDM for the campus is going to be important. You know, this is a constricted residential area. We only have, you know, so much roadway to work with. And so TDM is, I think, a good first step. I think another good step after that would be what you mentioned, Nadeem, kind of, you know, reaching out to the parents and trying to really communicate expectations and boundaries and guidelines around drop-off, you know, behavior. And maybe that can include a circulation diagram of the neighborhood. You know, we ask that you come in this direction, and that you, if you're gonna, you know, try to go back out the same way, that you loop around a certain way and exit as opposed to making U-turns. And then I think, you know, the enforcement piece of, you know, being able to enforce the no U-turns and then enforcing it and providing, you know, alternative solutions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marissa. So I'm going to open it up to anyone in the audience who wishes to just add a few comments. If you wish to speak, identify yourself or raise your hand or turn on your camera and announce yourself. Going once. Going twice.
Hi, this is Scott Pietka.
Scott, go ahead. I'll give you 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Hello, a resident at 232 Marich Way, near the high school somewhat, and looking at various maps to try and figure out kind of the bike paths and how far that spans down Almond Avenue and other just pedestrian crosswalks. I'm seeing, at least in Google Maps, the only current pedestrian crosswalk exists near Almond and North Gordon Way. And so even if I think parents were encouraged to drop off children and do a loop, if they were coming in off of San Antonio Drive, that they don't have a way to actually cross the street legally until they get to the far end of the high school. So as I guess for even safety mechanisms for parents and students to access the school, it seems like with the student drop-off zone being closed, there's like, I think as Marissa, I think, was alluding to, or the people, like a more comprehensive strategy needs to really be thought through, because the surrounding neighborhoods for Valencia Drive, you know, there's a way to get out of the neighborhood, but it's pretty complex. So yeah, it doesn't seem like an easy solution available, given that the safety of bicyclists are being considered, but obviously it creates another bottleneck in other surrounding spots.
Thank
That's
you, Scott.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? Okay, going once. Going twice. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public comments. and bring it back to the commission for any thoughts or comments or feedback to the city to consider in this not easy problem, the whack-a-mole problem. Steve, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chair. And I think that one of the things that I would really like to see come back to us in a reasonable time frame would be some recommendations from more of the stakeholders than we have on the call tonight. And what I'm thinking about is that there's a student body, there's a PTA, and then of course there's the residents. And Nancy, thank you for representing them for at least part of the traffic area that's very highly impacted, but we have other parts that are impacted that aren't represented here tonight. And perhaps, and Marissa, I don't know who would own this, but maybe you and Mr. Rosenberg could pull together with the PTA and the student government a very small committee and meet a couple times and talk about potential solutions. And if the PTA were involved in that, because they're the ones who, in a lot of cases, are driving people to school and then flipping around and doing U-turns and whatever, and come back and the city, the staff can look at what they come up with and provide some guidance and bring that back to the commission. And then we can take a look at that in a much more informed way than we have right now. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Steve. Suresh, Tom? Go ahead, Suresh, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think, like you said, this is a complex issue, and there are some short-term fixes, but ideally we should be looking at a long-term solution. We used to have a drop-off area, through the drop-off zone along Almond, but that may not be sufficient even if we open it up, because it's going to, if that's going to make the cycle track issues worse, or possibly more conflicts and more traffic congestion. So it's clear that in addition to the multi-pronged approach that Marissa, you alluded to, and Chair, that you said, there are two major aspects of this: the signage, the striping, and the communication. Commissioner Steve has a good idea of pulling together a committee to help with that communication. But I think along with this, we'll probably need a long-term solution in terms of a drop-off zone. What you made a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation as to what the traffic pattern, how many drop-offs and so on. But I think it would be good to have a measured data as to what that traffic is. And I'm not sure the city has done that in the recent past, but it may be a good idea to read, given where we are today in the situation, to understand the traffic pattern, the drop-offs a little bit better. It's not just Valencia, Alicia, and then there's Gordon as well. So I think all these three hotspots, understanding the pattern will help us come up with a better solution. If the drop-off zone is along Jardine at the back, that's fine. But how will that be sufficient to alleviate all the 3 or 4 hotspots that we see? I think in long term, understanding the pattern and coming up with a long-term solution is essential. It may be a good idea to do the measurement now, because there are some, assuming that we won't have any drop-offs in the front of the school, and if that's going to be the mode of operation going forward, I think this is a good time to understand what those hotspots are. So, I would really encourage the city to kind of come up with a more long-term solution and start talking about that solution quickly. So it's going to be, my guess is it's going to require a bunch of community outreach once the plan is in place. So the sooner we get started on it, the better.
Thank you, Suresh. Tom?
Now, my only, I don't get over there very often, so maybe Principal can answer this, is that I'm looking at Apple Maps versus Google Maps, and one of them has, on the north side on Jordan, there's 8 tennis courts versus 12 tennis courts. So it looks like there's construction. And I'm not sure which one is the more recent one. And the reason I was asking that is because it looks like there's a bypass or parking slots that go from the north side of Jordan by Castile Way all the way down through to North Gordon. And I don't know if that's all torn up or if it's just an old picture.
It's just, this is a factor in the previous semester that exacerbated the challenges on Almond. But as of now, what we call the East Drive, that's the road on the far east side of campus, is opened, and we use that for pedestrians and bicyclists. That has drawn a significant number of people who used to go around to Almond. And then also there's an entrance between the tennis court and the baseball field that is also just recently opened, and we're going to reserve that for pedestrians. And so both of those entrances weren't open through the first semester. They just recently finished construction on the field. There are currently 8 tennis courts that are available. There's space for 12, but they're using the last 4 as just a staging ground for continuing construction.
Okay, so that's the current thing. Because it looks like as you go down south from there, there was a mini loop, and it looks like they put another building in there, just like east of the swimming pool.
Right, that just got completed at the beginning of the school year.
Okay, so you guys took out a bunch of like parking slots through there too then?
Yeah, the effect of that has been to cut back on the number of parking permits we give students. We're currently able to meet the needs of staff, but students, we used to give out 100 and we give out, I think, 60 student permits now.
Will that go back to giving more out in the future once the construction's done?
Well, it's more than a year away. We're looking at everyone's point about a longer term plan is definitely what we would like to do too.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so let me share some of my thoughts with you, Marissa, and to some extent also with the high school. First, I know there's a lot of dialogue between the city and the high school, and I guess to some extent also Ms. Seaman is involved with that one. I want to encourage that you continue that dialogue. This is not an easy problem, and I think to the extent that we keep talking, I think we'll explore short-term ideas and long-term ideas. The second point I want to make is Marissa, I'd like for you to bring it back to the commission in April for the April meeting, and sort of give us an update as to what has evolved in the thought process, and also what tasks would be implemented in that time frame. I'm going to break down my suggestions into 2 categories. I'm going to call them the Band-Aid, short-term Band-Aids, and then other suggestions for the long-term, potential long-term solution. In the short term, I think we need to just increase the signage, and of course put the double yellow lines and make it increasingly more difficult for cars to make a U-turn. And that's not so much just the school drop-off on Valencia and Elisa, that applies to both streets, by the way. I think it's just, it creates, by having 4 lanes of traffic, that is a recipe for a disaster. And I think it would be shameful and horrible if we just wait for an accident to happen for us to react. We need to kind of use that Band-Aid quickly and shortly to begin to signal to the population that we're serious about this problem. Now, in terms of what might be the long-term solution, I think moving everything to Jardin or Hardin is a whack-a-mole problem. You're just shifting it from one problem to another, and you're going to have the residents on Jardin kind of come back and scream and yell at us, and that's not fair to them. So we need to think of something that kind of spreads out that burden. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, and this is 800 vehicles in 20 minutes, just, it's not, whatever solution we're going to come up with, I don't think our streets are capable of supporting that level of volume. And so, I want to encourage you and the high school to think really hard about what we need to do to reduce that volume. And this is not by 5 and 10%. This needs to be reduced substantially. I don't know what the answer is. Some education, perhaps thinking of doing a one loop around the high school. You come in Alicia, you come out Valencia. I don't know what the answer is, but we need to think about ways that really reduces the volume. Having 800 vehicles stuck between Almond, Jordan, Alicia, and Valencia is it's mind-boggling. And also, I think as you and I spoke separately, Marissa, you know, we should think about, you know, ways that maybe there's a parking permit or a fee that would be applied for non-residents. So if you come in and you want to park your car there, this doesn't address the drop-off, of course, but it addresses at least the traffic that comes in the morning and parks the car that contributes to that mess. And so we should think about that. But anyway, hopefully that's useful, Marissa, in terms of some ideas that we can take back and have the city consider and come back to us in April and sort of say, here's what we can do in the short term. Okay. Steve?
Yes, definitely.
Great, thank you. Steve, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I thought all those were terrific suggestions. And what it triggered in my mind was that, and I'm not recommending this, I'm just putting it out there as a possibility. I know that the major middle school in Portola Valley, where I drop my grandchildren off sometimes, has a one-way circuit around the school that is only one way at drop-off and pickup. And the rest of the time, they're two-way streets. And so, and the signage basically is very clear, and there was some enforcement around that to make sure that it occurs. And now everybody is aware of it, and they all behave that way. And so that is one thing to consider as to whether that makes sense or not.
Okay. Very well. So thank you all for your patience. Hopefully we'll get to a manageable solution in the short term. But meanwhile, let's just keep working on it, please. Great. So with that, we end item number 3, and we're going to move now to item number 4. And I see the city attorney on the screen. So the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. This is a first of several trainings. I know we did some training on SB 330. Eric and I did that and helped work with Marissa getting the SB 330 checklist together. This is just general commission training, kind of roles, responsibilities, Brown Act, public records. I do want to go into the conflicts because as a complete streets commission, there are some special FPPC regulations that I want you to be aware of. So I sort of fine-tuned this training for that. And then I know that Eric and I will be back to do help with some more training on some of the new housing laws like SB 9 and some of those that might affect you. So let's go to the first slide, Marissa. I think you're running this. Yes. So you, do I do it or do you do it?
I just shared my screen. Can you see it? It should be the first slide.
Yeah. So then how do I make it go forward or do you?
I would have to make it go forward unless you want to share your screen with the slides and then you can make it go forward.
Okay, I'll just say next slide then. So next slide.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, we got it down. I didn't want to make this too complicated. So anyway, it's not moving forward. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. Yes. So I think you understand your roles and responsibilities, but I know staff wanted me to go through them with you. And so you're really to help create multimodal transportation solutions and policies for safe pedestrian and bicycle and motorist transit activities. And you do have the responsibility for looking out for, as you talked about earlier, transportation and pedestrian and bicycle activities for the children going to school. You also have to look out for making safe transportation decisions that will help all the people within the city. And it also crosses jurisdictional boundaries because the streets don't just stop in Los Altos. Then you also advise the council on existing and proposed policies related to traffic calming and traffic enforcement, which was like your last discussion item. Okay, next slide. Yeah, maybe I should have shared screen. Yeah, okay. And you advise council on projects and budget priorities related to transportation, capital improvements. You provide for community engagement and serve as a conduit for community input, which was the prior discussion item is a good example. You listen to the citizens and their traffic related concerns. And the one thing that I have to note is you are a transportation and pedestrian. You're not a land use or design review body. And I'm saying that is because when you review projects that come through as a complete street commissioner, your role is separate from the planning commission. And now that we have SB 330, you will be reviewing projects at joint meetings with the planning commission. And I put this in as just I don't think we have a problem, but just so when you review projects under the SB 330 process, you're looking at bikes, bike racks, bike storage, access, bicycle chargers, certain things that could be amenities for the project, but you don't get into really the design, but you could get into design of maybe the traffic circulation or something of a project. But then it's the planning commission that they look at the height, the density, and more of the land use and the zoning and the actual project design. So I don't think that there's a problem, but just wanted to put that out there since we will be having these joint meetings, and I think they've worked out very well. I know staff thought it worked out very well. Okay, next slide. So this might be really basic to you, but you act as a body, and and that's accomplished through a majority voting or a majority giving direction on a matter. And so we've had an issue with this before, but 4 votes are required. It's not just a majority of those present. So tonight, if you were voting on something, all 4 of you would have to vote on it to make it be a yes or a no on that item. So, and that is in the handbook. And this is just something that comes up sometimes. Your statements or comments are not direction. And if you are going to be giving direction and making a motion, like tonight, you didn't make a motion on it. But if you are giving direction or like making a recommendation to the planning commission on an SB 330 project, or making a recommendation to the council about the Complete Streets Master Plan or something like that, if you're going to give that direction, it really needs to be in the motion. And a lot of times, this happens a lot in planning commission, but now that you're having meetings with the planning commission, people discuss and discuss and discuss something, and they want the turn lane or they want something changed, and it was discussed, but it never got added as a condition or it never made it into the motion. And so it's not binding on the applicant. So you have to be clear that if you make the motion to approve or make a recommendation to the council to approve the Complete Streets Master Plan. However, you want to change to this section or that section, please make sure it's in the motion or it won't be captured. This is just kind of a housekeeping item. Previous commission actions, either resolutions or policies, they remain in effect until changed by subsequent vote of the council or the commission. So it needs to be done by a vote. If it was put in place by a vote, it needs to be changed by a vote of the commission. So that's just some general housekeeping. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay.
Any questions? Johnny, actually, I do have one question. So one of the issues that comes up in the joint meetings and where delineation between design and traffic is the issue of parking. And parking touches both very heavily. So where do you draw the line?
You can, actually parking is per the zoning code. So I would say if you have some concerns about the parking, you can raise it, but it's really going to be the planning commission that determines if the parking is adequate, because it will be parked per code. And then I don't want to get into something off topic or in the weeds, but then when you have a density bonus project or you have some other housing laws that overlay that, there can be reduced parking because they're providing for affordable housing. So that's why we're going to be doing some more training on the new housing laws.
But that's exactly the question I'm trying to get to. And that creates a loophole, a big loophole, in the sense that I don't see any ownership right now. The commission doesn't own parking. And when the parking gets pushed onto the street, it's not the planning commission's ownership. So who owns it?
Well, it's because the legislature has changed the housing laws, and if people are providing for affordable housing, they give incentives or they give them the ability to have reduced parking. So, and we can't, and if the developer chooses to take advantage of those laws for their project, we will have some limitations on what we can do with things like parking. And you might have concerns about it, the planning commission might have concerns about it, and ultimately the council, but for certain projects that are coming through with the new housing laws, parking can be reduced. And I know people don't like to hear that, but that's what's happened with these new laws.
Suresh, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. In a similar vein, there's another discussion that we had about 2 meetings ago, and I think this was something that we need still clarification on. And this is again related to parking, but this affected the design that was presented itself. This has got to do with, for example, a resident trying to enter a parking space in a proposed design. And had to do with the amount of time that the car would be waiting to enter the parking space while the gate opens, or what the clearance needs to be for the car to completely clear both the street and then the sidewalk and so on, for while waiting for the gate to open. And this is a discussion that we had. I mean, it was not clear because there was not a clear, I guess, ownership of who's responsible for affecting or suggesting or coming up with a solution for the design. So I think this is similar to the parking, but slightly different. And again, I think Marissa was going to bring this up with the city and to see how we're going to address it. But this is another one. I'm not sure how we would address, I guess.
Oh, okay. Now that would be something that we can look at. Yeah, so it's really parking and queuing, and those can be concerns that would be raised to the developer either by your commission and also by the planning commission. And the developer should be able to have responses to that. But anyway, I'll be talking with staff about that. But those are good examples. Okay, so the next slide, I'm going to move on to,
Chance.
Sorry, yeah, Tom, sorry, one more question. Tom, go ahead.
No, thank you. So the last slide, are you saying that the developer can essentially do whatever they want because of the state law, irregardless of what our commission or the planning commission wants to do?
in so many words, yes. If they qualify as a density bonus project and they are providing a certain amount of units as affordable units, they can have a reduced parking requirement. And so we're going to do a whole training on this. So in a couple of weeks, so you'll
Okay.
we'll make you really mad then. You're gonna,
I'm just trying to.
the little brain blowing up. That's yeah. So we're dealing with the new housing laws, but providing affordable housing through density bonus has always allowed reduced parking, but it has just become more apparent, and then there's been more and more things that you can get through density bonus and Housing Accountability Act and SB 330, and so we'll be going through all of those laws.
Okay. And
So,
then, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I was going to say the last bullet on that previous slide was the resolutions from previous meetings and previous years. So there's potentially items out there that we don't know about from when we were on the commission, say like 5 years ago, that we would have to abide by, but we don't even know about.
I'm not sure. It's just more like if you've adopted a certain type of a certain policy, like a street calming policy for a certain area, or done something that would remain the policy until you change it. So I'm not sure because I don't handle complete streets that often, but that's what I'm thinking it would be. So I don't know. But that's just the general rule. If you've adopted something and you're applying it as a policy, you can't change it until a majority changes it. That's really the intent that I'm trying to get across to you.
Right. My own thing was trying to say that if we don't know about it,
yeah,
happened 10 years ago, then it's kind of okay. Thank you.
Well, that might be something that yeah, and the problem is we've had a lot of staff turnover, so you don't have a lot of institutional memory with people that have been there. And so I think with Marissa and Jim now there and Gaku, we got people that should be around and should be able to remember what you did a few years ago. So I think that's a positive. So
Okay.
Anyway. All
Thank
right,
you.
I'm going to go quickly through the Brown Act because you're a Brown Act body. Because you're a legislative body, you were appointed by the council. And the basic rule is your business, which is local agency business, must be conducted at a public meeting, and it needs to be noticed. And you only consider items on your agenda, and the public has a right to comment on all agenda items. There is a special rule about special meetings. If you hold a special meeting and it has just one agenda item, that you take comment on just that item. You don't have to have the general public speaker time, the open speaker time. A lot of times, certain commissions, or like the council or the planning commission, if it's a special meeting, they will have public comment just to be more transparent, but we're not required to. So anyway, but you took public comment tonight, and so that was good. So you're following the Brown Act there. So next slide. So what is defined as a meeting under the Brown Act is that means when a majority of the commission hears, discusses, deliberates, or takes action on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city of your commission. So what you have to be careful about is series of communications that you deliberate and you take some sort of direction or you take some sort of action on a business item. So you have to be careful about discussing, talking through phones or intermediaries where you're going to develop a concurrence on something. And this is when you're outside of a meeting. So when you're taking this discussion and it's not in a public meeting, that can be a Brown Act violation because all that discussion and deliberation needs to be in public. So the rest of the commission understands your thought process and the public also understands your thought process. So let's go to the next slide.
Is there a question, Steve?
Yes, can you go back to that slide for 1 second? Can you explain what it means where it says a majority of the policy body to hear? What does a majority of the policy body to hear mean?
That means 4 of you, if you're a 7-person body, you could talk with, 3 of you could talk, but once you add the 4th, you have a Brown Act violation. So,
okay. So for example, if in between meetings, one of us has a thought about something that is either on the agenda or not on the agenda, and we have an email conversation with one other member or with a member of staff, that would not be a violation, or it would be?
no, it wouldn't. Communications with staff, I'll talk about that in a little bit further, is not going to be a Brown Act. That is not going to be a meeting. And if you just communicate with one person or maybe 2 people, you're only up to 3. Where you get into trouble is where you get to 4.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, let's go on because you did a spoiler alert on me. So anyway, so the next slide. So there's case law that said that it would be a Brown Act violation that you had to have a collective concurrence, that you actually had to sort of make a decision. All 4 of us are going to vote one way or another, and somehow through meetings, telephone calls, or what. But years ago, there was a case. It was the Wolf case, Wolf v. Fremont, or Fremont v. Wolf. And it said that it was, since they did not develop a collective concurrence when they investigated it, they said there was no Brown Act violation. And this was, I believe, in 1996. So the legislature changed the Brown Act. And so if a council member or commission participates in the process of developing a collective concurrence, there may be a Brown Act violation. So just the mere discussion and working towards maybe that decision or that collective decision could possibly be a Brown Act violation. And so you have to be very careful on that. And there's some really draconian cases out there about these inadvertent Brown Act violations where I know there's one for the city of San Jose, and it was about Little Saigon and voting on that. And San Jose has 11 council members, and they do these memos, and 4 or 5 will sign off on the memo, and that's not a majority. And so they say they're supporting something or not. Anyway, what happened was one of the council members that signed the Little Saigon memo was in the elevator and in passing talked about the project in very general nature. And that ended up being the 6th person, and the court determined that that was a Brown Act violation. And that's, so I give that as an example where it could just be something in passing and it wasn't intended to be a collective concurrence of opinion or anything, But just, so I use that one as an example. I think it was a little extreme in that case, but that's what the court found in that case. So let's move on. So how to avoid, I think you skipped something. Or, yeah, this is not what my slides are saying.
Looks like this is number 7, and the one that I have, and then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. So that's good. All right, so there's some meeting exceptions. You were asking about this. Individual contacts between a commissioner and a member of the public or staff. That's fine. That won't be a meeting. So you don't have to worry about that. If you're attending a seminar or a conference, community meetings, meetings of other legislative bodies, and standing committees. I don't know if this commission has a standing commission, but the caution there is a standing committee is less than a quorum of the body that holds regular meetings, and it's noticed and it's open to the public. The rest of the legislative body that has created the standing committee can attend, but they cannot participate. So that's a very strange rule. I just ended up talking to the council last night about that. You can only attend as a mere observer. And so that's one of those strange Brown Act rules. Social or ceremony events would not be a meeting, but the caveat is you don't discuss or deliberate about commission items or commission projects. So if you go to a community meeting and 4 of you sit to talk about the traffic on Almond or something, you shouldn't do that just because you're at a community meeting or you're at a wedding or something like that. Just be careful not to talk business. And some city attorneys call it the no huddle rule. You know, sometimes it looks bad if a group of the planning commissioner or a group of the complete streets, you're at another meeting and you're all sitting together. People are thinking, well, why are they sitting together and what are they talking about? So anyway, so those are exceptions. Next slide. So serial meetings, and this will come up where you have less than a quorum of the body, but it results in a majority discussing the matter. And so there's the hub and spokes where you're the hub and then you're reaching out to these other people and you're deliberating. And so you reach out to 1, you reach out to 2, you reach out to 3, and you've got 4 people discussing or deliberating on something. So you've got to be careful about that. There's also the kind of the daisy chain serial meeting where one person A talks to B, B talks to C, C talks to D, and you've got 4. You've got a majority communicating or discussing an item, and it's not at a meeting. So you've got to be careful how you discuss things when you're not at a meeting. And as I put in here, it includes telephones, cell phones, and emails. And trust me, it's the emails that I worry about, because you can email back and forth with 1 or 2 people, and what happens if the 3rd person forwards it to a 4th? You've got 4 people now in that chain. So you have to be very, very careful with emails. And I review the public records responses, and a lot of times when I'm looking through them, I get a little worried about who all's talking to each other, because you know, I don't want Brown Act violations. Okay, next slide. So the rule is don't reply all, don't forward. There is an exception. You may reply all regarding arranging a time for a meeting or a special meeting or checking availability. But like if Marissa saying, can you all meet at this date and this time because we're going to talk about, you know, the traffic calming on Almond or something. You reply and you say, yes, I'm available, but then you don't say, but I'm never going to approve that new traffic plan. You know, that new traffic plan, you know, is horrible. So you can say, yes, I'm available, but don't say, yes, I'm available, but I'm never going to approve that, or that new project's crazy. So you don't want to do that. There was some commissions they were having a problem with summarizing the meetings that they were attending to their commission. And so they were sending out an email to the whole commission. I attended the planning commission, or I attended the council, and this is what they discussed. You know, I've been trying to have the commission members, when they come back and they report to their commission, that you report out at the end of the meeting, just to avoid getting into a conversation or having a Brown Act violation. And if you report out at the meeting, everybody hears it and the public gets to hear it. And so that's the whole point behind the Brown Act, is your deliberations, your discussions need to be in the public. This is a caution, use your city email. I don't think you have city emails, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I know. So I thought we were going to get commission emails, but anyway, so it's the City of San Jose case. It's a Cal Supreme Court case. And it said essentially that if you're doing city business, it doesn't matter what device it's on. If it's on your cell phone, your laptop, you know, your iPad, it isn't what device it's on. It's the test is, are you discussing, is it city business? And I watched the Cal Supreme Court arguments on that, and you definitely knew which way the justices were going with the questions. But when one of the justices said, so what do you mean, you know, city attorney? Someone has a memo and they put it in their home filing cabinet. They store it there, but it's about city business, but it's not in their office filing cabinet, you know, making a real broad analogy. She said, well, how come that isn't going to be public, but if it was stored at your office, it would be public? And, you know, they were asking some really questions, and, but that is the new law. And, you know, I know the council, we get PRAs for council members, emails, personal emails, and their city emails. And that's why I'm always saying use your city emails. And
are you saying that now essentially if we use our personal email, we give away our protections and have someone potentially look into our personal email?
No, but what I don't look into your personal emails, but after the San Jose case, what my duty and my obligation is to say we've received a public records request. And if you have any emails about, you know, traffic calming on Almond Avenue, please forward them to the city clerk. My job is not to go search your computer or your iPad or your phone. My obligation is to say we've received a request. You need to go research, review your emails on your personal device, and then let me or the city clerk know if you have any responsive emails. The request also says that it has to be city business related to the city, to that request, but purely personal emails or information would not be disclosable.
Yeah, but in principle, if I understand right, that gives potentially the public the right to get into our personal accounts when they have, which they do currently, they do have business that relates to the city, because we are using personal accounts.
Yes, so they don't, but the public doesn't get into your accounts. They just make the request. I forward the request to you, and then you have to make your reasonable and diligent search. So
When should we get city emails then in that case?
I don't know. I know this keeps coming up. I don't know where Gabe is with this, but it would be nice if, because then you could separate your work and your business. So wait till you get to, now the next thing's going to really make you mad. So social media. There is a new bill that came out in 2021, and they tried to update the Brown Act to get in line with social media and tweets and texts and Facebook. It's the big thing, Facebook and having your Facebook page. So they call them internet-based social media platforms, and of course all that's defined in the statute. So board members or council members, you may engage with the public on an internet-based platform to answer questions, provide information to the public, or solicit information from the public regarding a matter that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. However, board, council members, commission members are not authorized to use social media to discuss among themselves business within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. And then additionally, board and council members, commissioners are prohibited from responding directly to any post or comment that is made, posted, shared by another board member of the same legislative body. So that's AB 992. So it's the Brown Act has tried to catch up to the social media platforms. So next slide.
Hold on, I think we have a question from Steve and Suresh.
I knew that would make you guys mad.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really easy question. It sounds like our city attorney is recommending that whenever we send an email to anybody on the commission or the staff from our personal email, and it always comes from our personal email, that we copy in the city clerk. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that would be good, because you know what? Then it gets on the city server, and then when we do an IT search, it's going to come up. So that's, you got ahead of me, but that is one way that we, when I was doing training when San Jose came out, that was one of our practice tips. If you somehow you're on vacation or you're using your laptop, but it's about city business, just CC the clerk or CC the staff member, because then that way it's going to get on the losaltos.gov system. So that would be good. So
it would be great if you would send a recommendation, that recommendation to all the commissions, and then we would all be on the same page.
Yeah. So now Jim's on. Do you have a question?
I was just going to say, I would err towards CC and staff, because then the city clerk's going to get bombarded with a lot of email.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, staff or, yeah, we need, but CCing someone at the city hall, because then it gets on the server and then they run that. So anyway, I was talking about social media. There's the Facebooks, texts, and tweets. I can go into like a whole hour of social media and the do's and don'ts of Facebook and tweets and texts, and what's a public forum, what's a limited public forum. But for this, the general guidance is, like emails, keep your social sites separate from your public sites. Always be careful what you say on social media about commission topics, because that could lead to a Brown Act violation or possible due process conflict with an applicant. It comes up with council members more frequently. But if you have a Facebook page for your city council business, and you should then keep all your city business on that Facebook page. And if you have a Facebook page for your family and friends, and you do the birthday party pictures and all of that, you know, try to keep them separate, because once you start doing city business on your family Facebook page, you've now opened that up to, you know, public scrutiny, public records requests. So it's a emerging technology, but when you're out there in public, you have to be very, very careful. And there's all sorts of rules about if you've created a public forum, can you block people once you become a public forum? And there's all sorts of rules about that. All right, next slide. So any questions about the Brown Act? Okay, so public records, I mentioned this before. Public records and Brown Act, they're transparency laws. So Brown Act, the meetings have to be open to the public and have the right of the public to speak on agenda items. Well, the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, is the people have a right to access records relating to public business. And these are writings prepared, owned, or used or retained by the local agency, which is the city. So next slide. So there's exemptions, you know, for privacy issues. Personnel records aren't subject to the Public Records Act. Drafts. The reasons why drafts aren't released is, you know, a draft staff report, a draft ordinance, a draft memo, you know, they're drafts. They're not the final conclusion. They're not the final recommendation. A lot of times they have errors. And so if you release drafts, or let's say you have a draft of some part of the Complete Streets Master Plan and it's only a draft and it has clearly some things in there that need to be worked out. If that was made public, it could really confuse the public, or, you know, and it's not going to help with when the project actually comes before the commission. So drafts are not released. Of course, attorney-client records aren't released, and then certain police records, but there's been very substantial changes in the statutes regarding police personnel records. Another example are appraisals of property that the city's selling or buying, but the appraisals will be made public once the transaction is complete. Okay, next slide. Here we go again with emails regarding city business are public records. The general rule is just assume all your emails and your information is public or will become public, because with emails, you just never know where it's going to end up. The city has to follow a process under the PRA to respond to public records. And then responding is different from disclosure. So you have to respond within 10 days, but that isn't the same as when you have to disclose the records. And then you can get 14 more days to respond under certain circumstances. But that's just responding. You can get 14 more days and do your response and then say, we've located the records and they're going to be made available in 30 days, or, you know, we found them, now we need to review them. And a lot of times what you do now is you release records on a rolling basis, just because so many of these PRAs have just hundreds of emails that you have to sort through. So if there's any legal action against the city, attorney's fees are awarded if the petitioner, it's determined the city failed to respond, the city failed to produce records that were disclosable. And so the PRA it's very draconian with attorney's fees. I believe there's no cases where the city actually got fees for defending a PRA case. The statute says if the city or the local agency may prevail if it's found out that the PRA request was clearly frivolous, which is, you know, practically like beyond a reasonable doubt. It's really hard burden to prove. All right, now we're going to go on to conflicts of interest. Next slide. So just so everybody knows, if you have a conflict of interest, it does not mean you did something wrong. It only means that you cannot participate in making or attempt to use your position to influence a governmental decision if you know you have a financial interest. So participate in making or attempting to use your official position, that would be the commissioner. That's very, very broad, and it means you don't, if you know you have a conflict with something that's going to be coming in front of this commission, you don't try to influence your other commission members before the hearing. You don't try to influence staff, or you just stay out of it. And it's before the meeting, during the meeting, and I would even say after the meeting. If you have a conflict, you need to, stay out of that project. Next slide.
I actually have a quick question about this. Is that okay? We get this question a lot. So I see in the slide that it mentions a financial interest, but I also know when it comes up a lot is when a commissioner lives within a certain radius of a project. Can you speak to that?
I'm going to get to that. Yep. But so under the FPPC, a financial interest is an ownership in your real property, usually your home. It's a source of income. And yeah, I'll get to it because it's like 2 slides of let's go to the next one because I'll go
okay.
through the whole, yeah, I'm covering that one, Marissa.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the FPPC, you file Form 700s, and there's disclosure requirements that you have to disclose that you got a gift of something or something of $50 in value or more. And then, but just because you have to disclose something that was a gift of $50 or more, that doesn't mean you're disqualified. When you get disqualified, it means that you another threshold is met. So let's go to the next slide. So a source of income that would need to be reported would be $500 within 12 months prior to the decision. And that would be a conflict. You would not be able to participate. And the interest in real property is the one I will go into. That's in a slide or two. That's the 500-foot rule about real property. And that's a direct or indirect interest of $2,000 or more. They have not changed that $2,000 threshold. I can't remember when. I think it's always been $2,000. But, if it's your home, $2,000, it's a very, very low trigger. Business entity investments, that's $2,000 more or more. If you're a director, officer, partner, position of management in a business entity, and then the gifts, it's now up to $520 total within 12 months of the decision. So if you received gifts of $500 within the 12 months of the decision, you could participate, but once you get to that $520 total, and there's rules about returning the gift within 30 days or something like that. So the one conflict that the Complete Streets Commission needs to know about is the interest in the real property, and then the general applicability of streets and repairs. So next slide, because I'll explain those. So the ownership of real property, so that would be $2,000 or more of real property, and it's 500 feet from the decision would be 500 feet from the public official's property line, and it's property line to property line. It's not from your front door to someone else's front door. And so this is a new rule that came out in, I think it was 2019. I put in there also known as the donut rule. So you've got the donut hole is the 500 feet, and then the donut part is the 1,000 feet. But if you're in the middle of the donut, you're in that donut hole, it is now the rule that it will have material impact on the public official's interest. There's a presumption. So they've really tightened up that rule. Next slide. So then the donut, which is between 500 feet and 1,000 feet, creates a conflict if you have to look at these factors. Would it change the parcel's development potential, income producing potential, highest and best use, market value, or would it change the parcel's character by substantially altering traffic levels, intensity of use, parking view, privacy, noise levels, and air quality? And so when you're like 501 feet up to 1,000 feet, you should really talk to the clerk or talk to your liaison, and they probably should talk to me, because depending on what the project is, you may want to, we can always get an FPPC opinion, or you would at least need to run through these factors and make a determination if you think that it's changing, that you would have a conflict. And what I do as a city attorney is I give you the rules, I explain the rules, but ultimately you have to make that decision if you're going to participate or not. I will help get FPPC opinions and all of that, but ultimately the determination to participate is with the public official.
So on that question, so since the decision is ours, what indemnification do we get from the city on those decisions?
What kind of what?
Indemnification do we get?
You won't get indemnified by the city on that. It would be if the FPP, if someone reported you to the FPPC and they investigated and they were penalties, those penalties would be your own. And so, and also if you have to rely on an FPPC opinion to have immunity. And so if it's really a close call or something, my advice has always been, if there's a doubt, sit it out. I mean, and the FPPC, they do investigate. And they do give warning letters, they do no action letters, they impose penalties, and then also the DA can, at certain times, the DA can actually enforce the FPPC, but the FPPC now has its own enforcement department. So,
so the bottom line is really consider 1,000 feet as the rule instead of 500, just to be safe.
Yes, well, yeah, but a lot of times if you're between 500 and 1,000 feet and whatever you're deciding on, you can say, well, it's not going to change. I don't believe it's going to change my market value, or how can this change the intensity of use or view or privacy or noise? Because actually, if you're close to 1,000 feet, that's a long way away. And, but again, you would have to make that determination, or we would have to get a FPPC letter about that.
Okay.
Okay, and then next slide. This is the one that is ownership of real property for repair and maintenance. This one comes up with Complete Streets with your commission. So if the decision involves construction of improvements to streets, water, sewer, storm drainage, or similar facilities, and the parcel, your parcel, will receive new or improved services that provide a benefit or a detriment disproportionate to the other properties receiving the services, that's a conflict. So it's either it's going to be a benefit, it's going to be the up, or it's going to be the down for the impact to your property. That would be a conflict. But then if the decision solely concerns repairs, replacement, maintenance of existing streets, water, sewer, storm drainage, or similar facilities, and you're not receiving any special or improved benefit that no one else is getting, then that is not a conflict. And this one comes up now with Complete Streets. I've had questions about it more and more. And it just makes sense that, you know, if you're going to be reviewing something or making recommendations about some street resurfacing, some street striping, you know, street repairs, and you're not receiving any special benefit, you should be able to participate. It's really sort of the, it affects the public generally, and so you're not getting a special benefit, and so it would be okay. For
What about as we've seen in the last several months, traffic calming activities? So you're putting bumps on your street or the adjacent street to yours. Is that a benefit or not?
Well, so you have to, I would say if you are participating in, and they're putting a speed hump or bump or something right in front of your house, I would see that would be a conflict, because are you receiving a benefit because all the cars are going to slow down, or is it a detriment that you're now going to have all these cars, you know, slowing down and clogging up your street or something? And that would be, it would be disproportionate to the other people on that street. If you're, you know, I'd be careful about voting on a street calming device if it's within 500 feet of your house, well, even beyond 500 feet, because it could be seen that you're getting a benefit or you're getting a detriment. I know the speed bumps, people like them or they hate them. So, you know, but it would be definitely something you would want to talk to staff about, or call me and we would talk about it.
Steve?
Yeah, so what if there's a general vision document, like a master plan, and one of the priority projects that's been identified by staff and agreed by the commission is within 1,000 feet of one of your properties or your house? Does that mean you have to recuse yourself from anything that has to do with that Complete Streets master plan?
No, if you feel that because you're within 1,000 feet, it's going to affect the traffic, you know, and you might say, yes, it's going to improve the traffic and that's a benefit to me. If that's the case, and there is a way of segmenting the participation, and having the Complete Streets vote on that section of the master plan, if it could be segmented, what they would do is they would deliberate and give direction or vote on that section, you know, kind of carve it out, and then, but you wouldn't participate, and then you would be able to come back in and participate on the other sections. I've done that with council, and you know, you vote on the one that you know, that you take that one first, so then you don't influence it one way or another. The rest of the commission votes on it or deliberates on it, and then you come back in after the section that you had a conflict on. So that's called segmenting, and that would something, if that comes up, you know, staff would have to talk to me and we'd have to figure out how you do that. But that is a way of trying to carve out participation so people can participate.
Hey, Jolie, this is Jaime Rodriguez with the City of Los Altos. I was just curious to ask the question. I actually know the answer, but I'm just curious to hear it from you. Is there an issue with ownership or real property repair with a spouse or partner from one of the commissioners providing comments during a commission meeting?
Wait, I didn't understand your question, sorry. Is it?
Let's say for the speed hump example, you know, that a spouse of one of the commissioners or a partner of one of the commissioners, speaks very vocally and loudly during the meeting, during the public discussion of the item, in either position, for or against, does that put the commissioner in a position of risk in any way as part of the discussion as it relates to the Brown Act?
Well, it'd be the FPPC rule, because if the spouse and the commissioner are living in the same house, then, and if it could be a conflict, yes. Because, I mean,
I just wanted the commission to hear the answer. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, because if it's the same real property, and for the FPPC rules, property owned by you or your spouse or your immediate family, you're all in that, you're all covered. So, yeah, and your spouse, I can go on and on about all this, but anyway, income from your spouse can be imputed to you to be a source of income, or, so you have to be careful. Just because you better not participate, or you better not have your spouse participate, because that kind of flags that issue. So anyway.
Chair, if I may ask another question.
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
Julie, I don't know if you were on for the discussion around the high school and the traffic problems that have come up recently, but if one of the commissioners, there was no decision made. I mean, there was some advice given, I think, by the commissioners, but no motion. In that type of discussion, should a commissioner recuse themselves if they live within 500 or 1,000 feet or on one of the impacted roads?
Yeah, we'd have to look at that. I know, but see, that goes back to participating in the discussion, and we don't really, I mean, what they were discussing, really one area near the high school, and if people live within 500 feet of that, that gets into the making and participating in that decision. And just because you can't participate and discuss it and then say, oh, I'm not going to vote on it, because you've already started influencing that decision where you have a financial interest. So it's not just that meeting, it is working up to that meeting. So you need to, behind the scenes at the meeting, you should not participate. So anyway, so I'm getting towards the end. I know I've been, okay, next slide. So I think you all know this rule, but anyway, you need to publicly identify your financial interests, and it would be, I live within 500 feet of this project, or I live within 1,000 feet of this project, but I believe that it still could impact my personal real property. So then you refrain from discussing it and voting on it, and you step in and leave the room. Right now, what we do is you turn off your mic and you turn your screen off. That's how you leave the room. Except for, this is more for council, you can stay on board and vote on a consent item that you have a conflict in. But it must be ID'd in the notes, identified in the minutes that so-and-so recused from consent item number 3. The one thing that you can't do is you can't vote on something that then comes back and it's on the consent item, and then you recuse on you vote on the consent item, but noted in the record that you recused on that, because you may have already participated in something. But then when it comes back to the consent item, that doesn't really work that way. You can also step down and from the dais and leave the room, but you could come back and talk as a member of the public if it affects a personal interest, and that would be, your home. And personal interest is defined in the FPPC rules. And sometimes people do this and sometimes they don't. I think it's a little confusing to the public when you step down and you don't participate, but then you come back and speak as a member of the public. But as a member of the public, you can express your opinion on something. So
I understand. How do we leave the room, turn off the video and the mic, and somehow come back without knowing what to come back to if the video is turned off?
I don't know how people, well, you turn off the video, and I think I'm trying to think of when we did it just recently at the council. I think the audio, on the audio, they asked for the council member to come back on. So maybe they
listen now, I presume, right? You turn off the video.
Yeah, you turn off the video, and you're supposed to leave the room, but that doesn't mean you can still listen. And I know, yeah. So I'm trying to think. We haven't had many people leave the room with the Zoom meetings, but that's what they have done is they turn off the mic, and they must leave the audio on, because then we say, oh, so and so, you can come back in now. So but that was a good question. If you have a conflict, you can't participate in a closed session.
Mr. Rash, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Sorry, that is confusing. Let's say you're in an in-person meeting and say you have to leave the room.
Yes.
You cannot listen to what's the discussions. That seems different from in a Zoom session. You're saying we can listen to the discussion?
Oh, well, when you leave the room, usually I don't know what they're going to be doing in the new city hall when the new city hall comes back online, but usually the meeting is being, I thought it was being broadcast like in the hallway or something outside. I know a lot of other agencies, if you come into City Hall and then there's doors, you can stand outside the doors, but then you can still hear them talking. So, that's how it has been in the old days when you had to leave the room. The reason why they want you to leave the room, I understand the reasoning for this, is they don't want you shaking your head or doing any sort of body language that would possibly influence people. And trust me, I have seen people do that. So anyway.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And then disqualified member doesn't count towards the quorum. So if you have only 4 people and someone has a conflict, that breaks the quorum, and you can't have that, you can't hold that item until the next meeting, until you get another person back. And so that's different than abstention. So anyway, when you need to find out about FPPC conflicts, contact the city attorney, contact the city clerk, and do it early. There is a new rule, and it came out a year or 2 ago, and I was surprised that they actually changed the regulations for this. But if you are absent on a meeting that you have, that there's a known conflict that you should not participate, or you leave the meeting to avoid the disclosure, or you come late to the meeting to avoid the disclosure that you have a conflict, it is now needed to be disclosed in the record that you still had the conflict. I never had that come up ever, but I guess there were enough people that were leaving the meeting when there was a conflict and then coming back to the meeting, or just leaving the meeting and not coming back, to avoid the disclosure. I didn't realize that that was a big enough problem to change the FPPC regulations. So, okay, the next slide. this is just more ethical kind of rule. So perception is important as reality. If public perceives that you have a conflict, sometimes it's just better to sit it out, because you know, maybe the public, you know, you're never going to really get to explain to the public, you know, no, I really don't have a conflict here. But if it just looks bad, you may want to sit it out just to avoid that perception. And the FPPC rules, they're what you must do, and ethics are what you ought to do. And so you need to be careful about perceptions and of conflicts. So, and then there's common law conflicts. And that would be that you have a bias or an animosity about a project or a person where you're not able to provide that person, that applicant, a fair hearing. And so when you're sitting up there reviewing something, you need to be impartial and you need to avoid favoritism. And then ex parte disclosures, I don't know if you would have that many at Complete Streets, but if there was someone coming before you about some sort of decision or permit or application, and you spoke to that person, and you may have received information that the rest of the commission doesn't have, or it's not in the staff report, then you should really disclose it, because you don't want to be making decisions on information or evidence that's not in the record, your fellow commissioners don't have, or the public doesn't have. So it's for the rest of the commission and also the public to make sure the decision is being made on all the information and someone isn't just holding secret information from the public or from the rest of you. And then I'll close on this one, abstentions. You know, it's my opinion and the opinions of lots of city attorneys that you have a duty to vote. And that's why you're put on these commissions, and you have an obligation to come prepared and have and an obligation to vote. An abstention is counted towards the quorum. So if all 4 people were there, so you would still have the meeting. It wouldn't break, you know, it wouldn't cause a lack of quorum, but it wouldn't be counted as a vote. So if you only have 4 and someone abstains, that's a 3 vote, 3 people voting, and that vote would fail. So you could still have the hearing, but the 3-1 would be a failed motion. And we've had that before on some other commissions. And that's why I brought it up early. 4 people need to vote to take action. So anyway, that's it. This is very basic, and I'm sorry, it's probably boring rules and regulations, but I did want to go through all of this with you. And the next training that you're going to have is going to be more about the housing laws, and I'll make sure we have lots of.
Okay, Jolie, I think we lost you, your audio.
All of you are very interested in that. So anyway, any more questions? Oh, it says my internet is unstable. Any more questions or anything?
Thank you, Jolie. I think, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. On your slides on the emails, you said don't do a reply to all and don't forward. One of the things that a little concerned is there's a group email that can be created, and there is one for the Complete Streets Commission, and it's a city email, and residents have sent to that email, and we've seen it, but as not a person within the city or an administrator, I don't know who all that goes to. I mean, I can make the assumptions, but that was kind of a question in general, like the group emails or emails that are BCC that you don't see all to. Granted, if you do BCC, all reply all is not going to get to those people, but reply all to a group email, you don't necessarily know who that all goes to, but it could go to a lot of people that you don't know to.
That's why it's really better just not to reply all, just because you don't know who all it's going to. Like when I send stuff to the council about certain things, I put on the top, one, it's attorney-client, and then I also put in there, do not reply all and do not forward, just so we don't get into an inadvertent Brown Act discussion.
But with the a group email, it's not even a reply all. If you just do a reply, it goes to, it could be 12 people or 20 people or whoever's in that group, but you just don't know who's that group unless you're, an administrator.
Yeah, well, that's you should be careful about that. You might want to just reply back to the person that sent it to you or something. Yeah.
Right. Well, my question is more, has that been addressed or thought about, or there's maybe something to think about too? So.
Yeah. It would be careful about who you reply to, and that's why it's very difficult. And it's posting or liking something on someone's Facebook page that has, that can even start getting into Brown Act because you're supporting a position or you're taking, you're saying, yes, you support it or you don't support it. And if it's something about complete streets, you really even need to be careful about that stuff. And like out on neighborhood, whatever that's called.
Yeah, next door.
Next door. Being out there and talking about certain things that are part of your jurisdiction, you should really be careful about that too, because you don't know who else is out there that on your commission that you may be influencing, or you may be getting into a discussion and you don't even know it. So emails are tricky. That's all I can say. They're very tricky. You just have to be good.
Assume it's probably okay to forward like a meeting notice. Or one of the things that tell that you get that says, oh, this meeting is going to talk about, safe routes to school to several of your neighbors, just to let them know that they can participate.
Yes, and see, yeah, they're not members of the commission. But even then, if you forward it to them, you would say you might be interested in this, or you may not even want to say, you could say, oh, you might be interested in this, but my position is, this or that, because you never know where that email is going to end up, and you've already put your position out in the public. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Marissa, would you please forward that presentation to the commission, to all the members of the commission?
Sure, yes.
We have a thin audience tonight. Suresh, go ahead.
So just a thought and question. What's the barrier in providing emails for all the commissioners?
I'm not sure. I forget. I know I've had the conversation. I think it might be costs. I'm not sure. Or it's just too hard to manage the server with everybody having their own emails, but I don't know. I can talk to the city manager, and then I'll let either Jim or Marissa know what I know. It comes up every time I do this training. It comes up. So
yeah, the back-end costs of then managing and doing a search and all that stuff might actually be more than doing it right the first time and giving everybody an email ID.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk to Gabe about it. So anyway, all right, and I think we'll be back. And Marissa, is it going to be like 2 weeks? Eric's going to come and do housing laws, or do we have a date for that? I'm not sure.
We don't have a date yet. We meet monthly, so we can talk about getting you on the schedule for next month or the month after.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be good. Because we're trying to do all of this. Normally we don't give complete streets training on the housing laws, but we need you to know about the housing laws because you're having these joint meetings with the planning commission. And I know you have lots of questions about the parking and all of that. So we'll definitely hit on that at your next meeting.
Great, thank you, Jolie. That was very informative. As you said, we have lots of questions. We're saving for the next training session. So I'm gonna actually, we have a thin audience. So I wanna quickly see if there's anyone who wishes to share the thoughts. If you have any thoughts you want to talk to the commission about, this is your chance. Going once, going twice. Okay, hearing none, I want to thank the city attorney for being patient with our questions tonight.
Oh, no problem. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, next.
Thank you, Jolie.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
5-minute break. It's 7:35. We've been at it for 2 hours. Let's reconvene in exactly 5 minutes at 7:40.
Marisa? Oh, she's out. Jaime, are you there?
Yes. What's going on, Kaku?
Hey, I just wanted to check something. I'm sharing our screen right now. This is the PowerPoint presentation, and I wanted to check, since I wanted to do this, presenter view, I want to see what it shows on you guys' perspective. So do you guys see just the full screen, or do you see like the presenter view?
Right now it's presenter mode.
Okay. I wonder how I can do this, but
There's if you're in when you're in Zoom, there's one of the buttons there is to switch screens. If you're on a different screen,
oh,
okay. 2-screen monitors, you have to look at your Zoom controls or Ring Central controls. Because I have 2 monitors also, so I switched before. That's why I always ask what people see on the screen.
I only have one.
You've got one? Yep. And if you share your whole screen, you're sharing your whole screen, or you're sharing the app? I mean
the app.
So try sharing the whole screen, and then do it again. Now run it. Yeah, now I see now I see presentation. Oh, it was in presentation, but until you do whatever.
Yeah, but it was for me too. But okay, I'll just put my notes somewhere else then.
All right, thanks, man. You don't need notes. You got this, buddy.
Okay, it is 7:40. Can the commission please reconvene? All right, hello, everyone. Okay, Tom, great. Steve, Suresh. Steve, Suresh, you back? Steve? Steve? Right, let's give Steve a couple of minutes. Steve?
I'm back.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, the meeting is back in order. And now we move to the next item, which is number 5 on the agenda, and that is the CIP update report. Marissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Gaku and Jaime are going to be presenting on the CIP update.
Thank you. I'm going to jump into my screen share. Give me 1 second. Can I get a confirmation that you can see my screen?
We can.
Yes, you can.
And can you now see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to walk you guys through an update on the active transportation safety projects for the city. And as a quick background for people at home and as a reminder for the commission, the city of Los Altos funds its capital improvement program and operating budgets on a 2-year cycle. The current CIP that the city is in was adopted by the city council at the end of last fiscal year on June 22nd. And the CIP breaks up the different projects related to transportation into really 2 categories: streets and roads, and pedestrian and bicycle safety. Gaku is going to cover the elements for you that are specific towards the street and rehabilitation projects. So I'm going to fly over those as part of my presentation so that Gaku can get into those in a little bit more detail as part of his presentation. And again, today's update is just an update on the active transportation projects at the city. So on the pavement side, Gaku will cover these for you a little longer in a short while, but the most current active project is the Fremont Avenue Pavement Rehabilitation Project between Grant and Stevens Creek Road, roughly 95% complete. And the only thing pending right now are signs and green bike marking installations. And the recently completed street resurfacing projects is last year's street resurfacing job. And that did include complete street elements on 3 focused streets that this commission participated in the design process for. That includes Fremont Avenue from Springer to Dolores, where we installed buffered bike lanes. Campbell Avenue between Cuesta and Fremont, where we also installed a combination of buffered bike lanes and bike routes. And Eastwood Drive between Miramont and Covington, which provided a bike route to the back of Block School for the bicycle parking. Gaku will cover this in a short while about the active design phase for the upcoming annual street resurfacing program is underway, but I'm gonna let Gaku cover this in more detail. The other thing I did want to highlight for you is that upcoming project does include the St. Joseph Avenue improvements that we've discussed with the commission over the past year. That will include an active sidewalk widening element between Robles Ranch and Diodora, Drive that is currently undergoing surveys so the design can begin and be ready for award with that project. And the overall project complete street elements will include a combination of bicycle boulevard and buffered bike lane treatments. And then there is an active project within the city limits, but it's not being led by the city of Los Altos. And that is the resurfacing of El Camino Real. This is a Caltrans-led project. Caltrans is resurfacing El Camino Real on both sides of the street between Palo Alto, roughly at the Menlo Park border, all the way down to within the city of Mountain View near the Highway 85, just south of the Highway 85 interchanges. And that design is roughly at 95% design. We're still awaiting to receive those 95% design files from Caltrans, but we are being told by Caltrans that they are on schedule to award that project this summer, early fall. And so I'm going to spend a little bit more time here on what I'm going to call the bicycle and pedestrian safety projects. And as a quick reminder, a lot of these projects and future pedestrian bicycle safety projects that are related towards the implementation of the Complete Streets Master Plan are actually being coordinated with the annual street resurfacing program for implementation. So one of the projects that I want to cover first may be new to you. We haven't discussed this project in the past, but the city is undergoing a design for restriping of Cristo Rey Drive. That is the last that is the last street within the city of Los Altos at our southern tip before you get into Cupertino. And the city has a project that's at about a 95% design right now. There was a guardrail that was damaged, I think it was late last summer, early fall, and we're going to have to replace that guardrail as part of an insurance claim. That's introducing an opportunity to resurface a portion of Cristo Rey and also to add additional complete street treatment. So we're looking at a project right now that will install buffered bike lanes along Cristo Rey Drive to the western city limit on that street up to Friar Lane. And so that project is currently under design, is at about a 95% stage. We have an active project to rehabilitate the Fremont Avenue pedestrian bridge. This is the bridge that feeds into the Loyola Corners business district. That design is currently at 65%. And if you have any specific questions on that, Marisa is the best person to answer those for you here tonight. And one of the projects that I think we received the most interest in, it's a project that we've deferred over the past year, but we're now back on track. We're at a 50% design. This is to look at repairing the different pedestrian activated flashing beacon systems around the city. We have roughly 17 flashing beacons in the city. 7 of those are along San Antonio Road, and those are the pedestrian activated flashing beacons that are in the most state of disrepair. And so we do plan on wrapping up a project this spring, putting it out to construction before summer to repair all those ped activated flashing beacons over the summer for the start of the coming school year. We do have a different combination of different equipment in the city. And so one of the things that we're discussing right now in the city is trying to standardize on that material. And that's one of the things that we're at right now. One of the projects that we just talked with you about last month was the intersection access barrier removal CIP. That specifically is the installation of the ADA improvements and trail improvements along the Hetch Hetchy pathway, specifically at the intersections of Estrelita Way and at Los Altos Avenue. So that project will be coming back to you probably within the next couple of months. One of the projects that was the most anticipated for this current fiscal year is the first phase implementation of the Complete Streets Master Plan, specifically the signage and striping improvements that were recommended as part of the Safe Routes to School element of the CSMP. We are at a 95% design phase. So this project recommends to implement all of the signage and striping improvements that were recommended in the school improvement maps as part of the Complete Streets Master Plan project. We're just about done with that design. The thing that we're discussing right now internally at the city is if we actually want to bid that out separately as its own bid package, which is the current form it's in. But because there was so much striping work to do, we're looking right now at about a $550,000 construction package just for those signage and striping improvements. And as a reminder, the City Council dedicated $500,000 for this project over a 2-year period, $300,000 this first year, and 200,000 next year, knowing that we are slightly short with this current available funding this fiscal year. One of the things that we're looking at is possibly rolling up all of these signage and striping improvements into the upcoming annual street resurfacing program for next summer. That way we get a better construction price on the improvements, as we'll be doing a bunch of other signage and striping improvements with that job. And we may be able to work out something in the specifications where this becomes a first priority implementation at locations where we're not doing street resurfacing work. This project has also opted us to look at the option of doing potentially some microsurface work on streets that we didn't initially plan to do, because there will be so much change as a result of the implementation of the recommendations of the CSNP. That's something that we're considering, and Gakko will go into that in a little bit more detail. The other CIP that we look at regularly, it's at city staff side to implement projects, is our annual bicycle and pedestrian access improvement CIP. I apologize, I just realized I forgot to put in brackets what the CIP number is, but that is an ongoing implementation of bicycle and pedestrian improvements around the city. Some of the things that we're looking to use that funding for today is to dedicate portions of that funding to do a partnership with Caltrans, where, if you recall back in our prior discussions through the CSNP, El Camino Real, which is being resourced by Caltrans, today doesn't include any vertical elements within the buffered bike lane spaces that we're working with Caltrans to implement. But we recognize within the city that there's a benefit to implementing some vertical elements to help us achieve our class 4 bicycle lane facility that we long-term want in the city. And so we're looking at the option of dedicating a portion of the available funding in the CIP to purchase some of those what are called K71 markers. You may see them as in other bike lanes in other communities. It's about an 8-inch wide delineator, about 30 inches high, and just provides vertical delineation from adjacent vehicles to that bicycle lane. It isn't an element of the Caltrans project now, but we want to have a discussion with Caltrans to see that if we were to give them the funding or furnish the materials, if they would consider implementation for us, so that when those resurfacing improvements along the commuter are complete, that full class 4 bike facility that's currently recommended in the SMP would be implemented with the project. We're also looking at the use of the annual bicycle pedestrian access improvement CIP to gap close some existing funding shortfalls from other CIPs, specifically the in-road light system maintenance. We know is going to be significantly more expensive because of the 17 flashing beacon systems that we have in the city. About 14, 15 of them need some type of repair. And so we don't have enough money in the CIP for that project. So this CIP would be a gap closure once that project goes out to bid, to be able to repair all of those PED systems in the city. And it would be the same thing with the project just above that we discussed with the Safe Routes to School improvement plans. Again, the city has 300,000 now. We're looking at about a $550,000 project. If we didn't wait to bid that out until the summer, we could use the CIP to gap close into an independent project today. And we're also looking at additional improvements along Almond Avenue as part of the cycle track implementation that happened last year, potentially adding some K71 markers, doing some demonstration projects, other low profile curves to keep vehicles from unloading, like we heard earlier tonight, within that buffered bike lane space. Some of the other projects that are in the CIP that have not started, these projects were deferred as part of a decision to wait on the adoption of the CSNP to see how priority ranking falls out, is specifically the University and Longterm project. And I put this project specifically because I know there were some emails from residents within the community asking for this project to move forward. This project was deferred last year while we waited for the CSNP to be adopted. That adoption should be happening early in the spring. But as a reminder to the commission and to people at home, we knew this project when it was deferred that there was a lot of interest in wanting to see some improvements. So we did implement some near-term improvements in anticipation of the deferral. Specifically, we installed an all-way stop about a year ago at the intersection to help facilitate bicycle or pedestrian kind of movements through the intersection a little more safely at slower speeds. So that's it for my presentation. This was an informational item only, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we're not looking for any specific direction from the commission tonight. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Jaime. Any questions from the commission? Suresh, go ahead, please.
Just a couple of quick questions. One is, I saw that you do have a line item in there that in your presentation, Jaime, about some improvements to the cycle track and the Almond Avenue and so on. There was a proposal to do some sort of a temporary study by installing some sort of physical barrier closer to San Antonio. What's the status on that?
Yes, thank you for asking. So we were looking at some of the specific improvements along the cycle track on Almond Avenue. Two things that we specifically were looking at that we discussed with the commission before were installing some of those K71 markers specifically close to the intersection at San Antonio, roughly from the driveway of the fire station to San Antonio Road. We've actually already procured the materials for that. We actually just picked it up about a week ago, but we're waiting for the materials so we could begin an outreach process with residents to solicit their input. That was something that the commission asked us to do, like, hey, come up with an action plan, but before you do anything, solicit some public input. So now that we've got the materials, we're ready to do that. We only had not started the public outreach because that material is so hard to get. The wait period is actually close to 6 to 8 months. We just took advantage of some relationships we have with contractors, and we were able to procure 10, which should be enough just to do that little piece. Now that we got that, we just have to schedule the community outreach.
Okay, and then a related question was, there were also some discussion around the signal timing, that intersection and potential changes based on some information collected over the last few months, I guess. Were there any changes made to that timing?
We haven't implemented any new timing to the intersection at San Antonio and Almond, but that is something that is an ongoing discussion with us at the city. So we're waiting to potentially make those improvements when we schedule in the other improvements, like the installation of those K71 markers. So we have an opportunity to kind of let the community know what we're thinking about changing towards, and then solicit that input before we implement anything. So that, again, that just needs to be scheduled now that we have the material.
Okay, thank you. Sort of not related directly to the CIP budget, but are we going to get an update on the Safe Routes to School E&E program anytime? Or what's the status of that program?
I'll let Marissa give you an update on the EE program. That's the Education and Encouragement Program, the project funded by the BTA. Marissa? Yeah,
this is the reason why I'm asking this. This kind of goes to this, to the earlier discussion about Valencia and Almond and the drop-offs and so on. And this is one avenue to get bicycle traffic up and reduce vehicle traffic. So it's kind of, wanted to see what the update on there, and are we making any progress?
Yes, so we still have Andre on from Alta Planning and Design, and she's the EE coordinator, Safe Routes to School coordinator. And she's still working with us and moving forward with all the projects that have been started earlier. So that includes the training assemblies for students in classrooms at school. So there's going to be a pilot program that'll happen. So they'll do kind of one set of assembly training, and then they will solicit feedback and kind of make some final tweaks to the program before they roll it out across all the different schools. That was supposed to get started early this year, kind of January, but because of Omicron, it got pushed back a little bit. So that's still forthcoming. And then there's also an advisory committee that's been formed, and that has had its first meeting, and the second meeting is scheduled for a week or two from now. And so that will be a group of kind of school administrators and principals and school staff in the city to kind of, talk about best practices and share ideas and share kind of challenges and ways to kind of solve those challenges. So that's kind of a broad overview. Also in the past, recently we completed the toolkit. And so that kind of really gives an outline as to how to run the in-class trainings and the assemblies. And that is a really cool document that has a lot of very practical hands-on guidance. And let's see, I mentioned earlier in the meeting, there are some surveys that are being done. And so those are going to roll out soon to students and also to school officials and teachers. And so that'll be collecting data so that both before and after the kind of rollout of the assembly and the trainings. So we'll kind of collect data from schools on the current situation, and then we'll, do the pilot program of the assembly training, and we'll tweak it, and then we'll roll it out into all the classrooms, and then we'll collect data after that as well.
Thanks, Chris. Is the toolkit available on the CSMP site or somewhere?
I believe it is posted online. I'll find out where it is, and I will send out the link.
Okay, great. And then was there a budget allocated for the Safe Routes to School E&E program?
Suresh, I think let's try to keep the conversation to the agenda item.
Okay.
We'll bring in the Safe Routes to School to a different discussion, or perhaps comments afterwards. Steve, go ahead. You're muted.
I have a quick question for either Marissa, probably this is to Marissa, which is that when we talk about funding gaps for 21-22, it looks like the projects that Jaime summarized are now funded to some degree with a couple of gaps through June 30th of this year. And then we're into 22-23, is my assumption correct?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So then whatever else comes on our plate over the next meeting or two, just like the issue that came up today around Valencia Drive, if it doesn't have to do with just signage and striping, that would then fall into the 22-23 timeframe for implementation. Would that be a fair assumption?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, it looks like all of our funds are committed for the projects that are already identified for the rest of this fiscal year. So anything that the commission or staff would prioritize over and above what's currently on those slides would then be pushed out until after June 30th.
Are you meaning specifically for kind of the infrastructure improvements we talked about for Almond and Valencia and the Los Altos High School area?
If it weren't just signing and stripage.
I'm not totally sure I'm following the question, but I think what your question is tell me if I'm wrong. If there are kind of the things that we talked about during the first item tonight for the Los Altos High School that are more infrastructure improvements, and maybe those can't be done during this fiscal year, and would they have to be pushed to next year? Is that the question?
That's my question, and that's just one example.
Okay, yeah, so for that one specifically, I think that, what we talked about as far as infrastructure, like the double yellow lines and the couple of signs, I think that would be something that I would ask Jaime to incorporate into his improvement plans for this year. Since those are pretty small updates with low costs, I think those could be rolled in since we're still in kind of the development phase. And then, maybe if there were other additional things after that, we would slate them for next year's budget.
So if I can just add into that, so it really depends also on the size and scope of the project. As Marisa mentioned, maybe some really simple signage and striping work the city could implement either this year or as part of a project next year. If it's a significant infrastructure project, like let's say, hey, build a sidewalk for 4 blocks, along Hardin, something like that. That wouldn't be a project that could just get done next year. That project would need to be identified in the discussions with the commission, the city council, as projects that they're interested in being funded by whoever's recommending it. But those projects would need to compete with everything else in the city that is an infrastructure project. So just because we identify a project doesn't mean it gets funded in the next year. It could take 5 years. It could take 10 years for a project to even get on the list. That's why we do these master plan projects like the CSMP, so that we have, kind of chopping blocks of projects trying to build off a year or 2 years out. But we have to have a policy discussion to say this project is a higher priority than something else.
Yes, and along those lines, everything is then, whatever comes on the table then is looked at along with an evaluation of what's in the current master plan, right? To see where that may be, where it would fit and what might get bumped.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
How many questions? Okay, so one quick question to you, Jaime, and maybe to Jim. What is the perceived or projected impact of inflation on the projects that are currently in the CIP pipeline?
I'll let maybe Jim. I know how the city is addressing that issue with inflation and project costs.
Yeah, it's a challenge. We're kind of right now taking it. Well, we're starting next week. We're starting the staff budgeting process, and at least for next year's projects, we're going to have to factor inflation in, which would come out of the there's a construction inflation number in engineering. Just forgetting the name of the publication, but anyway, that is kind of the industry standard for watching construction inflation. Engineering News Record.
ENR.
ENR, yeah, thank you. And so in terms of the projects that we have in this year's budget, I think we're taking it on a case-by-case basis. We've been in kind of design mode most of the year, and so I think right now it's kind of anybody's guess where things lie depending on the type of project.
Okay, so if you expect that the projects will be materially impacted by inflation, can you please bring them back to the commission for re-examination or perhaps rethinking the priorities?
Sure.
Steve, go ahead.
Just a follow-up on a little different angle on that, which is that with the infrastructure money that's going to be starting to trickle down to states and communities, would we expect to see any of that money trickle down to Los Altos for any of the projects that we have within our vision?
It's too early to tell, but we're certainly looking at that and hoping, that there are projects that would qualify for those funds.
And so who owns going after that money?
What do you mean?
I mean, I imagine that the money just doesn't come down like rain, that there has to be some process requesting a project be approved for funding at some level.
So I can try to maybe start the answer to that question. So we feed recommended projects into what's called the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan, or the RTIP. That's a process that's led by the Valley Transportation Authority on behalf of all the cities of Santa Clara County. And then all of the other agencies like VTA in the other counties like Samtrans in San Mateo County or Contra Costa Transportation Authority in Contra Costa County, they all feed those projects into the Regional Transportation Plan that's led by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So when there's significant infrastructure funding that comes down from the feds to the state to back out to these different districts, usually it's projects are funded based off of their constructability, a priority through the Regional Transportation Plan. And so those are typically larger projects along freeways and highways, maybe some large expressway projects. But at a local level, within something which I know for us it may seem big, but when you're comparing it to the region, maybe a smaller project like in Los Altos, then we have to compete either for grant funding or we have to prioritize try to compete for small project, or the funding that does come in, if it does trickle, we have to prioritize that internally within the city. Does that answer the question?
Kind of. So do we anticipate that anything that is within our master plan could potentially qualify for anything?
So luckily for us, one of the things that the VTA historically has done is that any projects that are recommended in an agency's bicycle or pedestrian transportation plan, which for us is our CSMP, would fall under the bucket of fundable projects at an MTC level for bicycle and pedestrian improvement. So anything that's in the CSMP would be a fundable project that would compete for grant funding when it becomes available.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So actually, let me see if there's anyone in the audience who wants to speak on this item. Call for anyone in the audience who wants to comment on item number 5. Okay, I don't see anyone's up. hand is up, so I'm going to move on to item number 6 then, and that is the street resurfacing project.
Thank you, Chair.
Actually, I think item number 5 isn't quite over yet, right? Gaku, weren't you going to present a few things that still fall under item 5?
No, actually, Jaime actually covered some of the items that I manage, such as El Monte, Fremont. So I think we're ready to move on.
Okay.
So thank you, Chair, and I will start sharing my screen for a presentation slide. Here it is. So Jaime touched on the resurfacing project lightly, but I want to take a little bit more deeper dive on our project. And since it is the biggest CIP we have annually in terms of budget. So here it is, 2022 annual street resurfacing project. And we have 4 CIP projects categories. The first one is annual street resurfacing, annual street slurry seal, annual street striping, and city alley resurfacing. From the top, resurfacing is when we basically resurface a roadway, and this covers heavy construction. We would in most cases basically remove the top surface of the roadway, prep the surface, and bring in new asphalt. This is shown on photos on the photo on the top right. As you can see, it has a lot of heavy equipment involved. You have to haul out the old asphalt and haul in tons of new asphalt. And this is a more expensive project for more poor condition streets. And next up is street slurry seal. This is a much simpler process. We prep this, the surface. We don't remove any layers. Basically put a top coating. As you can see, on the bottom right, microsurfacing is done as part of the street slurry seal project. Basically, you put a new coating on top, let it dry, temperature, and you have a fresh new surface. Annual street striping basically is there to fund the striping that needs to go in after these resurfacing, because you'll get a fresh surface. City alley resurfacing funds the city to pave city alleyways that the city owns. And whenever we look at city resurfacing project, we also try to incorporate complete streets elements by choosing streets that that could use additional cyclist striping, or additional crosswalk, or school route improvements. So so here's a little bit more breakdown on how much funds each CIP has. As you can see, it's a large sum of money. This is actually the first year we actually had a huge budget increase, and this is the first year that we have that funds, because we to achieve overall PCI of 75. I'll go more in detail about the PCI process, but this is the breakdown of funds. Next up is street selection. The most frequently asked question to the Transportation Division is, when is my street being done? People see asphalt trucks doing work elsewhere in the city, and it's understandable that you get curious to see when your turn's going to be. So I like to kind of go over how the city goes about selecting streets every year. The first tool we use is the pavement report, which is done as a part of the PTAP program, Pavement Management Technical Assistance Program. And this is funded partially by MTC. Basically, a consultant surveys every street in the city roadway and gives it a rating from 0 to 100. And that is the PCI, Pavement Condition Index. And then this is the cover of the report on the top right side. And in this report, it shows you, it will give us the PCI of every street, and also some other key element of this report is it gives us budget scenarios analysis. For example, it will give a projected analysis of what our PCI would look like with current funding. Or if I say, if we increase our budget by $2 million, what would the PCI look like in 5 years? Or perhaps if we had unlimited budget, what would our PCI look like? So that's the sort of analysis this project provides. And then also the last key feature is recommended street for treatments. So it runs its budget analysis and provides us with recommended streets to take care of each year. And here's a little bit of a snip from that section of this report at the bottom here. So it's essentially giving us in year 2022, take care of these streets, and this treatment type is on the very far right column. So we use this as baseline. We don't basically copy this straight into our, we don't basically bid out this project as is. We use this as a starting point to plan projects. And then next feature is, next way we choose streets is regarding safety improvements and complete streets master plan. If there are safety improvements or striping plan or projects that are in planning process and getting ready to be delivered, we can actually incorporate that into our resurfacing project. For example, we were planning on St. Joseph Avenue striping improvements, and we are actually adding St. Joseph in our street resurfacing project so that we can take care of resurfacing and striping at the same time. And it saves us money in terms of not doing two projects for St. Joseph. Other categories are traffic volume, proximity with other project streets, and safety hazard. If we had to choose one street and we would likely prefer to choose streets that have higher volume because they take on higher loads. Proximity with other project streets, it's more ideal to work on streets that are close together so that we are not sending contractor in spreading the work out for them, which would result in more cost. And safety hazard, if street is completely in poor condition and it's causing any safety hazard, we would take that into consideration as well. And I'll move on to the next slide. So another key question or comments we received from the community is, people will see their street not being done when maybe the street down the street is being done that is in a better condition. We see that often because this graph right here is the pavement deterioration graph, and hopefully I can show my mouse cursor here. Can you see my mouse cursor, by the way?
Yeah.
You can, yeah.
So at the top here, by the way, this is the PCI 0 to 100, 100 being excellent. If you fresh pave a street, it would start at 100, and 0 is the absolute bottom. And from here, 100, you would start gradually going down as years goes by. And at a certain point, it will start to take a steep dive. And that's how the street will deteriorate. So with that considered, we tend to, it is most cost efficient to take care of street before it gets bad. Obviously we want to take care of streets that are in terrible condition down here, but we also want to take care of streets that are in okay condition up here so that we don't end up spending more money by leaving it, letting it slide down this steep drop right here. So that is one thing I want to cover, because it is, I understand the frustration of, seeing other streets that are being paid and the streets that you live in maybe in a poorer condition. So just wanted to cover that. So this is the street resurfacing list for 2022. This is work in progress. We might have to switch things around depending on bid results or how the extent of repair we need to do. But here's the street list, and I highlighted some in red. These are streets that are selected as part of a combined effort with the Complete Streets Master Plan, so that we can do striping improvement at the same time. And here's a map view, so you can better visualize where some of these projects is taking place. And some of the key highlights are major streets or school route streets. I have on the left hand side here St. Joseph Avenue, Eva Avenue, Santa Rita Avenue, Berry Avenue, and Portola Avenue. So these are a project that is coming down the pipe and will likely have complete streets element in terms of bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. And in one case, St. Joseph Avenue, we're looking to add a sidewalk gap closure element to that project. So stay tuned. And that will be it for my presentation. Similar to Jaime's last presentation, this is an update item and we're not asking for any votes or approval. And
So, Dr.
Yep.
What's the PCI now as of Jan 1 of this year, and what's the PCI expected to be on December 31 of this year?
So the PTAP report is done every 2 years, or in fact, done whenever we get this funding approved by MTC. We apply to it, every other year. We did one in 2022. So the number we have from 2022 is 68. And we actually don't have an updated version.
You mean, sorry, 2020, not 2022.
Sorry, 2020. Yes, I apologize. 2020 was our last update, which we got a 68 PCI. And to answer your question, I don't have an updated PCI.
We have no estimates, so we are like in the blind. We don't know what we think it's going to be by the end of this year.
We can do some work to get an estimate. I know there's a program that can be used to give us an estimate based on what street we take.
For this commission to understand, so where we think with all the spending and all those projects, what's the end result? Where would it take us by the end of this 2-year period?
Chair, if I may, typically we've received a grant from MTC to do these PCI studies. We weren't awarded the grant in 2021, so we're applying again. If we don't get it, we're just going to hire somebody and have it done. So we should have a report by the end of the year, if not sooner.
Thank you. All right, Suraj, Tom, Steve, any questions or comments? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So Gaku, thank you for the presentation. Keep up with the good work.
Thank you.
With that, we move to item number 7, and that is the monthly staff report. Marissa, back to you.
Thank you. You all have received a lot of updates tonight already, so I don't have a lot more to update you on. As far as programs, we did talk about the EE program a little bit earlier, and the Complete Streets Master Plan. I think I mentioned this last month. Will be going back to City Council. It's being revised right now by Alta, and it'll go back to City Council for an additional study session is the word I'm looking for, on March 22nd. And so I think that with all the CIP updates you received tonight, that covers it for the monthly staff report, unless you have any specific questions.
Okay, any questions from the commissioners to city staff?
A quick question. So the revised CSMP, would that be available as part of the city council agenda, one of the meeting agendas, or is it a separate study session?
Sorry, say that again.
So the revised CSMP before it goes in front of the city council, is that going to be part of a city council agenda, or would that be a separate study session again?
It'll be a separate study session again. Yeah. And the draft, the kind of updated draft should be available about a week before the study session.
Do you have a rough idea when that might be, Marissa?
Let me look at my calendar. So the study session is on March 22nd. And I believe that I talked to Jeff about having the final draft finished and posted online on March 10th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any further questions? Steve, Tom? Okay, Marissa, it says here on the agenda you have, is that a request for a subcommittee creation, or is that something that we're going to do later, or what is the purpose of those 2 bullet points?
So this is something that we've talked about in the past. I know there are, we've talked about creating the subcommittee for the school improvement plan review. And so that was triggered a couple of meetings ago when we had the school improvement signage and striping plans at a meeting, and we talked about how it would make sense for a smaller group to review those. So that is the idea for that one. And also we have Bike to Work Day, now rebranded, I think since COVID, to Bike to Wherever Day, just in case you weren't actually commuting. So that's coming up, and we wanted to create a subcommittee for that as well, so that we can kind of have a breakout group to coordinate with Greentown and the police department and city staff.
Yeah, so given that we're short 3 commissioners today, do you want to, I suspect the first one you're looking to have commissioners who are absent tonight. So you still want to get a commission made, and or you want to wait until they're back in session?
Let's see. I know they are both a little bit time sensitive. I don't know how it usually works how does it usually work to create a commission when we have so many absences?
Well, I mean, at first I'll probe with the existing commissioners and sort of see if we have any demand or any volunteers to serve on, certainly the first commission, the subcommittee. Any volunteers for the first subcommittee? We're looking for 2 or 3. How many are you looking for?
I think 2 would be good.
So I think you probably were paying Suzanne, right?
Yes, I did reach out to Suzanne and Stacy today when I found out they would be absent about this. And Suzanne got back to me and said that she would be happy to help with one or both. I didn't hear back from Stacy yet, and I didn't know that.
The existing commissioners, I think, sort of who are in attendance tonight, I think it would be great if we can get someone to volunteer for the school improvement review.
Chair, I had a question about the subcommittee. So is the subcommittee limited to 2 or 3?
I can choose 2 or 3. I think I'm happy to make it 3 if necessary, but right now I'm going to solicit for 2, and if we have more demand, we'll make it 3.
I'll volunteer for the school improvement review.
Okay, let's start with that first subcommittee here, Marissa, with Suzanne and Suresh. And
I was going to say I could help on that one too.
Oh, perfect. Hey, awesome. Let's make it 3 then. We've got 3 volunteers. Great. So Tom, Suresh, and Suzanne on that first one. Steve, is that a question?
No, I was going to volunteer for the second subcommittee.
Perfect. It's great. I think for the second subcommittee, we don't need 3. We need at most 2. Because that's going to be a short-lived one. That's between now and April, May, and we're almost done. And so, Steve, it'll be great if you want to participate in that one. We need 1 more, and I don't know whether Stacy is willing to participate. So,
I know Suzanne has worked on that one in the past too.
I have experience on working on that in the past.
I'm sorry, so Suresh, you were saying?
Suzanne might have experience working on a program like that in the past.
She does actually, yeah, but I hate to volunteer her in her absence. So I think this is something I'm gonna hold back on that one. So here's what I'm gonna suggest, Marissa. I think you can reach out. You've got Steve already as an informal volunteer. And if you have Suzanne or Stacy, another volunteer, they can start working with you informally, not as a subcommittee, but informally to assist. And then we can formalize that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's an easy one. I'd like to work. You know, I remember what Suzanne's work was relatively straightforward.
Marissa, is it possible for me to get some of the work that's already been done to read through so that I'm not coming into this blind?
Sure, yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you know, I think would be great perhaps for Suzanne to just share any previous material also that she has with Steve. Great.
Thank you all.
So I guess that's number 7 is completed. So we move to the commissioner's reports and comments. We'll go around the table here. We'll start with Suresh.
I don't have any comments, Chair, but I think it would be good maybe for a future agenda to get a update on this, the E&E program, safe process for the E&E program.
Noted indeed. Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
On a separate note, we had we had the work plan completed and a calendar that went with it. I guess I'm just got a question for Marissa, or maybe an agenda item to kind of review that once a quarter or so to see how much we have covered and if you want to make any changes to it.
Okay.
Not the work plan itself, but the sort of the agenda, meeting agenda for the rest of the year. So we know, because we know what agenda items to add or not to add in addition to those, because there's quite a bit already identified as part of the agenda. So it would be good to keep that in mind as we add items or not.
Okay. Are you thinking of the meeting agenda review as something that the whole commission would do or something that the subcommittee would reconvene on to take a look at?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I'm going to let you make a recommendation, Marissa, whatever makes more sense.
Yeah, I think my recommendation would be the subcommittee.
Okay. I think, I don't think we disbanded the subcommittee, so technically speaking, it's still in standing. So
Yeah, I believe so.
To give us the update.
Sorry, say that last part again.
I'm saying since the subcommittee was not disbanded, we can ask the subcommittee to continue the monitoring and then report back to the commission on the progress.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Tom, updates, comments?
All the presentations that we saw today, can we get those posted or have access to them all?
Sure. I know, let's see, the slides don't generally get posted, right? But I know that I sent out Nancy's since that was a special case. And then I know that having access to Jolie's would be helpful. And then did you also want the paving and CIP ones?
Was there any reason that the presentations themselves are not posted, or is it because they're PowerPoint and you can just post them as PDFs?
Yeah, I don't believe there's, sorry, I don't believe there's any reason why they haven't been posted historically, so we can start doing that, I believe.
Cool. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, is this a time to talk about future agenda items, or
Yeah,
is
we
that
can talk
after?
about commissioners' reports and future agenda items. We can merge those two together.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, when we were talking about the improvements over by the bike trail that goes from Los Altos Avenue over to Gunn High School, The subject came up about some safety issues around electronic vehicles and concerns about speed limits and those kinds of things. And I was thinking tonight when Jaime was talking about the fact that we're about to begin implementing a major signage kind of execution across the city, that we should probably have a larger discussion about, do we want to, as a city, on our safe routes to school and on our bike trails and routes, do we want to really look at signage that will be more forward-looking in terms of the fact that there are more and more people on electric vehicles? And how do we want to comprehend that if we do? I don't know, but maybe that's something worth spending 15 or 20 minutes on. I don't know where you are on that, Marissa.
So it sounds like what you're saying is signage kind of, I don't know, restricting in some way electric bicycles.
No, I don't think we should restrict them, but I think we should certainly think about speed limits. You know, I don't know if we want electric vehicles going 28 miles an hour in a bike lane on some of our feeder streets. And I don't know how the commission feels about that. You know, I don't know how staff feels about that. But, and I don't know whether signage is the way to address it, but I think it's worth talking about. Are there any, maybe I'm just out on a limb here.
No, I mean, that's a good suggestion, Steve. I think this is, the staff should take note of that one and then fit it in as they see in on their priority list. But I think certainly considering what rules, and I guess we need to first understand what are the guidelines and rules that are existing already in relationship to electrified bikes and scooters or whatever these are called, right?
I mean, I saw an article in the paper that said that in the state of California, there's a speed limit of 22 miles an hour on an electrified bike. However, I've never seen that posted, and it was new news to me. So my guess is that 98% of the people who are riding them have no idea that that's the case.
Yeah, by law, Steve, you cannot sell a bike at 28 miles per hour. You can do 28 miles per hour in California.
You cannot, you said, right, Suresh?
You cannot, correct. So maybe this is something that we coordinated with VTA. I know that they may be working on signage plans and so on, because this kind of will also require coordination with all the neighboring cities. I'm not sure if Los Altos can come up with signage that is not consistent. That will be very confusing. But it is something I think we should address. For example, like, you know, the bike path we were talking about with the HHE project, we can designate that a class 4 bike path, and then, you know, by law you cannot have a fully powered electric bike there. That is a class 3 bike. You can only have a class 1 or a class 2 electric bike. So there are laws around this already. Maybe it's just a question of how we enforce it. But I agree, Steve, that it's worth discussing and coming with a consistent messaging.
Let's put it on the agenda, or should put it on the list of agenda items for us to consider in future meetings.
Will do.
And then maybe do some education first, understanding some of the points that Suresh brings up into what are the existing laws, what's VTA doing, confusion, potential for confusion, and then kind of figure that out. Okay, great. Other items? I think we also have 2 suggested items from one of the residents, Jim Wing. And we should think about those and sort of see if that merits to be included in the discussion. Okay. And then my last point to the commission here, and hopefully the absent commissioners will get to watch the video, and that is next month in March, assuming all goes well, we should have a commission leadership election. And I want to encourage everyone to consider that election process and participating into into the leadership of this commission. So I'll leave it there and then have you think about it for the next few weeks. Jim, I presume that you would like to speak with a video on?
I just wanted to remind Marisa, I think, how did I just forget her name? One of the missing commissioners has had some announcements for you to mention, Marisa.
See, I don't have them pulled up. I do think she had some, it was Stacy had some links that I was going to forward. Let's see. I thought it was links to forward, is it not?
Yeah.
It may have been.
Putting the email out.
Yeah, so it's some text and some links, and there are 3 different topics. So one is the 2021 Transportation Systems Monitoring Program Report with a reference to the VTA website. And then one is the Santa Clara County Active Transportation Plan update. And then the other was bike parking chapter update of the bicycle technical guidelines, which is the VTA document. And those are all links. So I will forward this to you.
Marisa, those guidelines might, VTA might have something on e-bikes in there. I've been trying to search it, but it's not very searchable.
Okay.
And Stacy, if you're watching the video, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Okay. Great. So with that, I thank everyone for attending. It is 8:42 p.m. on Wednesday, 23rd. Thank you all and good night. This meeting's adjourned.